In a world where hypnosis podcasts come and go, one man is here to deliver a knockout, no-holds-barred approach and deliver electrifying interviews with the world's top experts so you can discover the secrets to their success. Introducing the Hawaii Hypnosis Podcast. Subscribe to the newsletter and get instant access to 4 free skill-building audios that utilize a revolutionary hypnotic approach to improve your skills from the inside out. It's practically bulletproof.
Aloha, this is Antonio Perez with HawaiiHypnosis.org. Now today on the newest Hypnosis podcast, I'm interviewing Mark Tyrrell from Uncommon Knowledge. Aloha,
Hello
Mark.
there.
Hi
there. I'm great, yeah. Good to speak to you.
Yeah, good to finally get this podcast underway. It seems like it's been quite a few attempts at trying to get this happening.
Absolutely, yeah, and now we're going to do it.
Now, I'm curious, and I'm sure my audience is curious. Your name is pretty well known in the hypnosis community. How did you first develop an interest in hypnosis?
Well, that's a good question, Antonio. I mean, first off, my first exposure to the idea of hypnosis was my dad talking about something that had happened to him when he was a boy. And he described how one day he was in a tree and he fell out of the tree. And he broke his arm very badly. And he went to the hospital. And the doctor at the hospital had to reset the arm by breaking it again. And rather than giving my father any anesthetic, the doctor told him he was going to hypnotize him, which he did. Hypnotized my father. Told him he wouldn't feel any pain, which he didn't, and told him that he'd sleep very well that night and that the bone would heal very rapidly, which it seemed to do. So that, for me, was the beginning of a sort of fascination with the potential power of the mind, hypnosis specifically. Later on, I worked, when I grew up, I worked in a psychiatric hospital, a couple of psychiatric wards. And what I saw there were people being housed, if you like, and given medication, but not really helped, as far as I could see. So pumped full of drugs, but not necessarily being therapeutically sort of helped much. And I saw people suffering from psychosis, clinical depression, all kinds of addictions, alcoholism, heroin addiction, bipolar disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, you name it, they had it. But there didn't seem to be much sort of scope for helping them. Now, back in 1993, I trained with British Hypnosis Research and really got to grips with actually using hypnosis as a tool. And what I found then, becoming a hypnotherapist, was that the very kinds of people who weren't being helped by mainstream psychiatry, as far as I could see in the psychiatric hospital, could be helped sometimes incredibly dramatically purely by using the power of hypnotic communication. So, people who were clinically depressed, who were addicted to cocaine or alcohol or cigarettes, even people with bipolar disorder could be helped to manage it using, hypnotherapy within a sort of sensible framework of psychological intervention. All these people could be helped. But not only that, people who weren't supposed to be able to be helped through purely psychological means, people with physical problems could also be helped quite often. So people who were infertile, women specifically, who were infertile could be helped to become fertile through hypnosis. You could cure warts through hypnosis, help other sort of physiological conditions such as high blood pressure and so forth. So that astounded me as well. So my fascination with hypnosis has just grown year on year out. And in 1998, myself and Roger Elliott set up Uncommon Knowledge, really to spread information, not just about hypnosis, but about hypnosis within the framework of our emerging understanding of how psychology actually works in a practical sense. So we started running workshops on hypnosis. We did that for around 14 years. We also ran a diploma course teaching solution-focused hypnotherapy from 1999 to 2008. And since learning about hypnosis, I've had the honor of treating thousands of clients one-to-one, some of them as public demonstrations of hypnosis as well.
having exposure at a young age to hypnosis, be it for pain control or whatever, can definitely have a big impact. I remember the first time I was exposed to hypnosis, I think I was probably about 6 or 7. I vaguely remember this. It was in my my great-grandma's house, and she had a book. I don't know if James Braid ever had a book. I'm pretty sure it might have been Ellman's Hypnotherapy. I remember at the age of like 6, I think it was 6, roughly around there, I was trying to hypnotize my stuffed animals, and needless to say, they were awesome subjects. They're all somnambulists. Did
it work? It worked. Good.
I told them sit there, don't move, and they followed every instruction.
Yeah, yes, exactly. But at least they had hypnotic catalepsy.
Yep, and I used the cliche of a watch.
Yeah.
I think the first experience I have for hypnosis working on me, I had used a book. I think it was Ellman's book where he talked about the eye fixation. My friend was probably in. I was really young. I can't remember what grade it was. My friend had put a card up on the wall, had me focus on I think it was Ace of Diamonds or Hearts, and I used to have a real bad neck tic where I would always stretch my neck out, and I don't know why I did it. He did that, and then boom, never had that problem ever since then. So that was definitely my first experience of it working.
Yeah, I kind of recall using self-hypnosis for sports performance as well. I used to do a lot of athletics as a teenager, and using self-hypnosis. I didn't really know what I was doing, but seemed to greatly enhance my performance physically as well. So these early experiences of hypnosis really can set a life pattern sometimes.
And it's a good thing to be able to take control of your own mind.
Yeah, and that's primarily what the therapeutic use of hypnosis is for.
A lot of people ask me what hypnosis is or how it works, and I tell people I don't have any, not so much clients, but different practitioners ask me what I think hypnosis is. I'm like, look, I don't have any particular model I go by. I just know that it works, and that's good enough for me. What do you think hypnosis is, and why do you think it's necessary for any therapist to utilize it?
Okay, well, it's an interesting one because it kind of reminds me of the fish asking the wise crab what this mysterious thing called water is. And of course, water is all around the fish. And in a way, we can see hypnosis is all around human beings as well. It's part of lots of different types of experiences. It doesn't just happen in a stage show or in the hypnotherapist's office. And firstly, I believe that hypnosis is a natural state of mind and body. And because of this, if we can see that it's natural, there's no artificial chemicals involved, it's to do with communication. If it's natural, then it would occur spontaneously in everyday life. And if you think about it, perhaps the deepest hypnotic trance possible for a human being occurs when you dream at night. Okay. Now, when you dream at night, what happens is that you become disassociated from your environment to such an extent that you forget the bed that you're lying on, you forget the bedroom. For you at that moment, it doesn't exist. So you've disassociated from that reality, and you've become associated to the contents of your imagination. And your imagination is activated to the extent that you become fully absorbed in it and you experience the dream. Now, we can see this happening also in hypnotherapist's office. The person momentarily forgets about the chair they're sitting in, the office around them, and they become so inwardly absorbed that they experience a dreamlike sensation. So disassociation is central to the hypnotic experience, I think. The well-known technique of splitting a person when you talk to them. So you're talking to the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. Now, I don't see hypnosis as a state of unconsciousness, like a coma, more a state of parallel consciousness or parallel awareness. So you could be talking to somebody, and you might look in. You want the conscious mind there. You don't want it to go away completely because the person can become totally unresponsive. But so you want the conscious mind there, but you also want the unconscious mind there. So you can talk to both parts of a person conversationally. You might look into their right eye and say something like, now there's two parts to everybody. There's a conscious part and an unconscious part. And I want to talk to your conscious part. Then you shift and look into their left eye. But I also want to talk to your unconscious mind, the part that knows how to grow hair, grow fingernails, mobilize your autoimmune response, produce dreams for you at night without you even trying to have dreams. And, that part of you, the part that knows how to heal and to overcome this smoking. I want to talk to that part, but also, shifting your gaze back to their right eye again, I want to talk to your conscious mind as well. So that's slightly confusional, but what you're doing there is you're making it clear that you're not always talking to the conscious mind, but also the unconscious mind, which is, part of the whole thing. So you use dissociation in your communication because hypnosis is a disassociated state. Now, I mentioned also that, hypnosis occurs during dreaming, so if anyone ever comes to you and says, I can't be hypnotized, or I've never been hypnotized, you could ask them, well, have you ever had a dream? Because that is the same machinery within the brain that produces hypnotic trance, it produces dreaming state. And, that occurs, the dreaming occurs during rapid eye movement. Okay. So, when you observe someone dreaming, you see that their eyes beneath the eyelids go from side to side. And this also can be observed in the hypnotic subject. Now, you mentioned with your stuffed toys, Antonio, swinging a watch in front of them. And in fact, that's a highly effective way of hypnotizing someone. It's a bit too cliche to actually use in a therapeutic setting, perhaps. But if you do that, then what you're doing is mobilizing the REM response, which also happens when we dream at night. So the REM state, paradoxical sleep as it's called, can occur when people are asleep, in which case we have a dream. But it can also occur when people are awake, in which case we're in hypnosis. So, hypnosis is a waking state, accessing the REM state. So swinging a watch in front of people can artificially get them to start, putting the eyeballs from side to side, which stimulates the REM response, which can tip them into a wide awake dream or a hypnotic state. It's also used in something called EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, which has the person flick their eyeballs from left to right and right to left, rapidly. And the practitioners of that don't perhaps all realize they're using hypnosis or even understand about the REM response, but it's exactly what they're doing. So, it seems that this response, this REM response is an optimum state as well. We learn instinctively when we go into that state. So in order for people to learn something good for themselves or something bad for themselves, they need to go into the REM state. Now, there's another element to the REM state, which is that it occurs through relaxation, when we go inward. But it also occurs during other times, which I'll talk about in a second. So I don't know if you've ever had the experience where you're nodding off to sleep and suddenly you twitch, you flicker, you have it's like a spasm and it's totally beyond your control. You kind of wonder what happened there. Well, that always happens before you start dreaming, but most times you're not consciously aware of it. But it seems to be what triggers the REM state. And it occurs when we're going off to sleep, but it also occurs during another type of time, and that's during an emergency or a dramatic sort of like an RTA, a road traffic accident. Someone will be have the experience of the orientation response firing off. It's called the orientation response. Or the PGO. What's happening is that the PGO spike in the brain, pons genicular occipital spike, is firing off just before you dream and while you're dreaming, but also when something shocking or surprising happens. So this explains why, stage hypnotists can do something unexpected or shocking, like tip someone back and tell them to sleep, because they're firing the PGO spike in the brain, which also fires before you start dreaming at night. This also explains why people often say that when they have an emergency situation, everything becomes quite dreamlike, and goes in slow motion, because they've tipped into the hypnotic state, the REM state, through the shock. So there's two ways to hypnotize someone, progressive relaxation as when we go to sleep, but also through, shock as well. And, what happens is that people can learn or mislearn during an emergency. So, for example, if someone's in a road traffic accident and they're hit by a red car, then what you find is that because they've been tipped into the REM state by the firing of the PTO spike in the brain, that later on, when they they've gone on with their life, they might see a red car and have a flashback to the accident and feel very frightened. Okay, this is like post-traumatic stress disorder. And really, we see post-traumatic stress disorder and stuff like it as like a post-hypnotic suggestion working in the brain of the person. So they, the red car acts as a post-hypnotic trigger, and they have the fear response gets wheeled out in their brain. So whenever we go into REM, we become highly suggestible. That's the point I'm making. And people don't often recognize these everyday states as hypnotic states. It kind of makes sense to use hypnosis to overcome something which has been hypnotically, created in the first place through life. So hypnosis really is all around us. I would link it to the REM state, and to, the learning state. It's important to remember as well that hypnosis isn't a therapy in itself. It is a delivery system for, good ideas, so it makes people better at learning. Because for psychotherapy to work for somebody, it's not just about them thinking differently, it's about them feeling differently. When you feel differently, your thoughts kind of tend to go into line as well.
When you're talking about using the whole thing with communicating with one eye versus the other eye, the conscious versus unconscious, I'm curious, did that come from the British hypnosis research?
Yeah, certainly. And I remember Stephen Brooks talking about that. But also it comes from the work of Milton Erickson as well. He would shift his body and talk to one part of the person, and shift his body and talk to another. And often the person's conscious mind doesn't even pick up on this, but their unconscious mind does. So now I'm talking to your conscious mind, now I'm talking to your unconscious mind, and really that's that's what he was doing a lot of the time. So yeah, you're splitting the person. It takes the pressure off you as well as a hypnotherapist. You're not trying to put someone to sleep. All you're doing is you're starting to talk to another part of the person. I've certainly had the experience of saying I'm not going to be talking to you for the next 10 minutes. I'm going to be talking to your hand, and we can just talk to the hand, and the hand knows how to warm up all by itself. And so that can be slightly confusing, and you have to have a level of rapport with someone before you start talking like that to them. But you can, this splitting, this disassociation is central to hypnosis, so you might as well use it. If you're talking to someone who's sitting in a chair, you start to get them to think about the actual sensation of walking on a beach, then you're splitting them. You're getting them to sort of move more away from the reality of the here and now with you and to some other reality within their mind. So it's a disassociation, which happens when we dream, it happens when we're in shock, and it happens with all kinds of learning as well.
I'm already getting a bunch of ideas generating inside my mind, so I can use it in a pre-talk later, even doing in a street hypnosis setting. I can describe what it is while I'm beginning to get them into the hypnotic experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
It seems like people wouldn't really pick up on it.
No, people don't generally pick up on that you're doing this. People kind of instinctively know that they have two parts of themselves anyway. People say they're in two minds about something, or part of them wants to do something, part of them doesn't. Or people say consciously that they don't have a problem with something, but then they blush, so their unconscious mind has other ideas. So people kind of know anyway that there's two parts of them. Now, very boring people tend to just appeal to the conscious mind, So you get some hypnotherapists who will just give conscious, they'll try to deliver hypnotic suggestions, but they're framing them consciously, like you're getting sleepy, your hand is getting light, and that's the way you talk to the conscious mind. Whereas, of course, the unconscious mind, sort of responds to different ways of communicating, which are more suitable for its workings, which I'll talk more about later on. But yes, so people don't tend to generally consciously pick up on the fact that you're using disassociation in your communication with them to facilitate the hypnotic experience.
Join the ranks of the movers and shakers in the hypnosis and NLP community. Subscribe to the newsletter and discover why this podcast is taking the world by storm.
I'm aware that you have been influenced by the work of Milton Erickson. What about his approach has impressed you?
Okay, well, that's a fantastic question. And firstly, what impressed me about him was his courage to be so naturalistic. And what I mean by that sounds very airy-fairy. But he was very much ahead of his time in the sense that he went beyond metaphor. Now, what I mean by that is that psychotherapeutic theory had always kind of constructed a metaphor and then treated that as if it wasn't metaphor. So, for example, Sigmund Freud, back in the late 19th century, early 20th century, devised a bunch of metaphors that he derived from Greek myth, which he applied to the whole of humanity. Okay, so people had Oedipus complexes, Electra complexes, and so on and so forth. And this is the framework through which he taught people to sort of view human beings. And then in the 19th century as well, hydraulics was the big technology, and psychologists, desperate to align themselves to science, sort of describe things in hydraulic terms. They talk about letting off steam, people repressing emotions, and so forth. So using that metaphor, then electricity was the next big technology, and people talked about sort of having to recharge their batteries, or feeling low and so forth. And then it's computers, and people talked about processing memories and needing to crash and so on. But what Erickson did was he didn't just take a bunch of metaphors and forget they were metaphors and try to apply them to everybody. He used the metaphors of the unique individuals who came for him for help. Okay, so that was a major sort of element of why I think he was so brave, and that's why it can be hard to see from the outside what his system was. It can seem as if it was totally spontaneous, whereas actually he was applying to very kind of real principles. Now, the other beautiful thing about Erickson is that Ericksonian hypnotherapy or Ericksonian psychotherapy wasn't really, how shall I put it? It wasn't Ericksonian. It predated him. I mean, Muhammad al-Razi, 19th century polymath, physician, astrologer, philosopher, and so forth, but also perhaps the world's first recognized psychotherapist, used many what would be recognized as Ericksonian interventions, centuries before Erickson, and he used them because they inherently work. So he would motivate people genuinely through what was interesting to them, okay, rather than seeing them through a veil of psychotherapeutic theory. Now, it's important to understand that Erickson wasn't just random in his approach. He did apply his knowledge to bigger principles. I mean, we were talking earlier, and you mentioned Bruce Lee, Jeet Kune Do, the way of I can't remember what he called it, the way of the intercepting fist, isn't it? But he basically went beyond recognizable technique. Doesn't mean that he went beyond recognizable principles. For example, Milton Erickson kind of intuitively recognized that we all have a need for a sense of safety and security in life, that we all have a need for a connection to community, we all have a need for emotional intimacy with another person, we all have a need for creativity and stimulation, to avoid boredom. He intuitively recognized that we all have a sense that we need to feel connected to something bigger than ourselves, that we need a purpose and goal in life, that we need to feel good about ourselves, and to have self-esteem, to feel as if our life is going somewhere. And he always applied his intuitive recognition of these needs that we all share, and worked very flexibly with his therapeutic interventions. So it wasn't just completely random the way he worked. But you can liken it very much to sort of Zen interventions. The famous story about the young samurai who was incredibly angry, and aggressive, and he heard that there was a great but old swordsman that meditated on top of a mountain. So this young samurai was determined to learn from this old man. So he went up there and he interrupted the man's meditations and he shouted at him, show me what hell is. And the man opened his eyes, the old swordsman, and he turned to the young sort of upstart and he said, why should I even talk to a stupid idiot like you? Why should I even deign to discuss anything with such a headstrong, arrogant, closed-minded, conceited fool like you? And the young man, no one spoke to him like that, the young samurai, so he unsheathes his sword, ready to strike the old man. And suddenly he gets a hold of himself and he calms down. And the old man says, that was the answer to your question. The first state you were in was hell. Now you've calmed down and you're seeing the bigger picture and you're getting towards heaven. So what the Zen master was doing there was he was doing therapy for the young man through experience, not just through words, which is what Erickson did. He would manufacture or sort of help precipitate an experience for someone so they could learn from the experience, rather than just him trying to get them to see something from a different point of view by talking to them. This is the difference between hypnotherapy and other types of therapy. In hypnotherapy, you're creating an experience, so you're more in line with how people actually learn on a deep level than just trying to get them to think differently. Now, I would suggest that hypnosis happens in all types of psychotherapy, but the psychotherapist isn't often aware that it's actually happening. Erickson contributed in all kinds of ways. He contributed to the fact that he used the unconscious mind positively. He saw the unconscious mind as a positive resource rather than the old Freudian thing, seeing it like a cesspit of all your hidden desires and unwanted, sort of repressed emotions and so on. Erickson saw it as a repository of wisdom that could be tapped through the use of hypnosis in order to help people facilitate happiness in their lives. He changed the way people view therapy in the sense that it could be brief, it could be 10 minutes, or it could be 3 weeks, or it could be 6 months. It didn't have to be long and drawn out. It was strategic, although he seemed to be spontaneous and have a different approach for everyone. As I said, beyond that, there were wider principles of work which he was using and which you can learn about. Once you understand that, you don't have to be restricted in a very seemingly narrow way of doing things. He did family therapy, which back when he was doing it was seen as irrelevant. He saw the person in context with a wider life and so forth. So he really was a pioneer, in all kinds of ways, certainly not just through hypnosis. Just to add to that as well, I myself have used Ericksonian principles to dramatic effect on occasion, and so you think about the fact that if someone pushes you, rather than resisting back, you pull their force so that your force is joined with theirs. It's not fighting against it. And I can remember, say this, a couple of instances whereby I thought to myself consciously, what would Milton Erickson do in this situation, or what would be his kind of approach, perhaps? And one particular time was when I was conducting a workshop and I was giving an introductory speech, and most people were smiling and nodding their heads and looking pleasant. One woman was glaring at me as if she was a paid assassin, and she was just her eyes were boring into me as if she hated my guts. And it's slightly off-putting when you're doing public speaking, if anyone's done that. And I was racking my brains thinking, did I used to date this woman? Why did she hate me so much? What's going on here? I didn't recognise that. And anyway, it came time for me to ask for the first volunteer for a demonstration of hypnosis. And terrifyingly enough, she was the only one who put her hand up. So she came out, and there's still sort of no, hint of friendliness. And she came and sat opposite me in front of everyone. And first thing I said was, why did you volunteer? And she said, because I don't believe in hypnosis. I don't believe for a second you can hypnotize me. This is rather not what you want to hear when you're about to do a demonstration for the benefit of a group. And then she proceeded to tell me that she was a psychiatrist, that she had so many years training and all these letters after her name, and so and so. I just started wondering why she was there at all. But anyway, I thought, well, I could just sit there wishing she was different, wishing that someone else had volunteered. But I thought, well, what would Milton Erickson do in a situation like that? What does she really need out of the situation, and how can I align what she really needs to what I really need, which is for a good demonstration of hypnosis? So I thought, does she need to make me look stupid? And I thought, well, no, I'm perfectly capable of doing that on my own. Don't need help. And I thought, does she need to be seen as professional? I think, well, that's her greatest need here. She wants to be seen as professional. So how can I link her need to be seen as professional to her going into hypnosis? Okay. And I thought, well, I said to her, I thought as quickly as I could, which isn't always that quickly. And I looked at her right in the eyes and I said, not before your unconscious mind lets you know, for the benefit of the group here, that it's professional enough to allow you to go into a deep hypnotic trance, will those eyes begin to close. Now that's a confusing thing to say to somebody. She's not sure whether I wanted to go into trance or I don't want her to go into trance, but somehow I've linked it to her professionalism and the benefit of the group wanting to learn something. So you see this look of incredible conflict on her face for a while. One eye's closed and it's cataleptically closed, hypnotically closed, the other eye's wide open, she's fighting. Eventually, of course, she goes into a beatific hypnotic trance and demonstrates perfectly all kinds of hypnotic phenomena. And then afterwards she became a complete convert, of course, which tends to happen. One person goes from one extreme viewpoint to the other. And she couldn't sing our praises highly enough for a few years, and then now she's settled down a bit more again. But you see the Ericksonian approach there. Rather than fighting her force or convincing her why she should go into hypnosis, I kind of aligned with her true her need in that situation, or her want, to be seen as professional. Again, Erickson was a master of task setting, or sometimes ordeal tasks. And I had this one woman who came to see me who was an air hostess or a cabin crew, as we call them now, So she was used to being on display and serving people drinks 35,000 feet in the air. But she was still self-conscious. She suffered from a great deal of self-consciousness. And her biggest fear, I asked her, what's your biggest fear? And she said, my biggest fear in life, and it's weird, but I really am frightened of falling over in public and walking along the street in public and tripping over. And I said, well, what's so frightening about that? And she said, well, people will think I'm stupid and they'll laugh at me. And I said, well, would you laugh at someone and think they were stupid if they fell over in the street? And she said, no. And I said, well, what makes you think you're so much better than everyone else? But that was my first thing that I said. But then I thought, well, what can I do with this woman? What might Erickson do with this? So remember, a reframe isn't a cognitive thing. It needs to be more than that. It needs to be an experience. How can I give this woman an experience which will change this forever for her? So I convinced her somehow to go to a busy shopping mall on a Saturday morning, and she was to try to purposely fall over. Now, when you're purposely trying to do something that before you felt, you might happen by accident, then it changes the whole thing, of course. Somehow, after hypnosis, I convinced her to go and do this. And she spent an hour and a half walking up and down. Eventually, she got the courage to fall over, just a bit, like a little trip. She noticed that no one did anything. So half an hour later, she gets the courage to do it again. But this time, it's a full headlong lunge that she does on the floor. And again, what people are like, bystander apathy. No one, everyone's doing that. No one does anything. But this time, she's starting to get annoyed that people are ignoring her tripping over. So she does it a third time, and then a fourth time, and then a fifth time. And eventually, little old lady comes over and said to her, are you all right, dear? Now, she, came out the next week and came back the next week and told me this has happened to her. And of course, it was no longer a concern because we changed to an experience. She can never think about that in the same way again. Okay. Getting someone to consciously do what they thought, their unconscious compulsion, getting them to do it as a chore was an Ericksonian tactic, so you're actually reframing it through experience. So he had a tremendous effect on the way that I practice and think about human psychology as well as hypnosis for therapy.
He had a very well-rounded approach. And one last note on that, a lot of people, I guess, in practicing Ericksonian, don't really practice Ericksonian. they almost take his approach and make it step-by-step, very rigid approach.
That's right. I mean, as I said, the whole thing about Ericksonian psychology, Ericksonian hypnotherapy, is that it transcends Erickson. So just trying to talk like Erickson or sound like him, because he was colorblind and he really liked the color purple, so he'd wear purple, or was it mauve? Purple or mauve tracksuits, and he'd wear, have it in the house and everything because it was one color he could see. And you get these Milton Erickson conventions where everyone dresses in purple tracksuits, and it's kind of looking at the finger, but not the moon the finger's pointing to. Whereas really to be Ericksonian, you need to forget Erickson. To talk about something being Ericksonian is very Ericksonian. Because what we're looking at is universal principles, which can apply to all kinds of things. Erickson could be extremely directive. It wasn't just permissive language. He could be extremely directive, but it's having the intuition to know when to be directive and when not to be directive. And that was really the sort of legacy that he should give to us. And hopefully we can, not just fossilize, turn into some sort of dead fossil what he was doing, but actually continue the sort of living inspiration, which was his legacy to us, I think.
You're listening to the Hawaii Hypnosis Podcast. Can I ask you to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes by going to hawaiihypnosis.org/iTunes and give us a 5-star rating?
Why do you describe emotional problems as emotional trance states?
Okay, well, that's a great question, and I kind of touched upon this when I was talking about the way we get catapulted into shock during accidents or during a trauma. So traumatic events tend to be highly hypnotic for most people, and because they're highly hypnotic, they tend to produce learning within us. We learn how to be traumatized. It doesn't not what you think of learning generally, and then something in the environment produces a post-hypnotic trigger, and we go back into the feelings we had during the initial trauma. Okay, so that would be a hypnotic experience. But also, smoking, for example, is highly hypnotic for many people. They suddenly realize it's that time again and they have to have a cigarette. One of the best ways I find to hypnotize a smoker is not to talk about beaches or lovely forest walks or, they may have never had a walk on a beach in their life, but you talk about smoking, because it's what they know. And, so you talk to them about the experience of holding the cigarette carton in their hand, and the weight of the box in their hand, and the experience between the fingers of lifting the cigarette to the mouth, and the feeling of the cigarette in the mouth, and the sensation of lighting and the sound of lighting the cigarette, and the smoke and the heat in the mouth, and the heat being drawn down into the lungs and so forth. And, the person with their eyes closed, they're not actually having a cigarette, but because they've done that hundreds of thousands of times, then it's easier for them. So you're using how they know to focus already, rather than trying to get them to focus on something they're not used to. So that would be, kind of a naturalistic conversational induction. But you see how, if someone who smokes says they can't be hypnotized, you think, well, why do you smoke? At some point, you must have become so focused and hooked on this that it was quite hypnotic for you. You see depressed people. I mentioned that I worked in psychiatric wards, and some of the people were what you call catatonically depressed. So you have that sort of, catalepsy, which occurs during the dream state as well. So we don't act out our dreams. It also occurs in hypnosis sometimes, but also occurs when people are so depressed that they feel they can't move. And what a depressed person is doing isn't focusing outward, they're focusing inward. Sometimes you can wave your hand in front of their eyes almost, and they wouldn't register their hand. So this is an extreme inward focus of attention, which can occur during hypnosis as well. Again, the person, rather than using their imagination constructively as when people are in therapeutic hypnosis, they're using their imagination destructively to frighten themselves or feel shame or feel guilt or feel hopeless and so forth. So you can see it as a and it's almost like when a person comes out of depression, they wake up. It's waking up, and actually they look different. They look bright-eyed again. They're able to focus outward again, and so forth. They recoup energy and all these kinds of things. So there are so many cross elements to hypnotic trance and states like depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, addiction, where someone focuses totally on what they're addicted to the extent that they block out external reality. The needs of the situation become blocked out. They can only see the addictive substance or whatever. And anger states as well. You can become highly angry with somebody, and all the rest of reality just blurs into the background. And it's only when you calm down again that you actually become aware that people are watching you being very angry. And it's like waking up from the trance state. So it kind of makes sense to treat difficulties, many human difficulties, which have this central hypnotic element to them, with hypnosis. You're treating trance states with trance states.
Because you said trance is all around us.
Absolutely right, yeah. And also, just to reiterate, I was talking about the connections between the REM state and hypnosis. And, there are so many connections between the dream state when we're sleeping and the hypnotic state, such as catalepsy, which I was talking about, where the body becomes waxy and still, and you don't move when you're dreaming. It's not the time you thrash around. You thrash around in your slow wave sleep, but the body becomes very still when you're dreaming. Also, often becomes very still when people are in hypnosis. When people are dreaming, you see them in REM state. You often see the REM state during hypnosis. When they're dreaming, they're utilizing their imagination and living through it. And that often happens during hypnosis. So really, the REM state does seem to describe the hypnotic state when people are awake and accessing REM, and also the sleep state of dreaming when they're accessing REM but they're asleep. But also, so many of these, emotional problems that people have that seem to have this REM component to them. I was talking to a young woman, who was very shy normally, but she had an anger problem, especially with her boyfriend. I said, "What's the worst thing you ever did to him?" And she said, "I broke his leg." I said, "Well, how did you break his leg?" And he'd forgotten to put a towel away or something in the bathroom, and she became so enraged, and she threw out his bicycle out the top window. He was sunbathing in the garden, and the bike landed on his leg, and he broke his leg, So she really wanted to get the problem sorted out, and so did he. He was still with her, amazingly enough. She told me about one time she was in public, in a busy street, and she started yelling at him, and she said it was like she's like going into trance. These were her words. She totally forgot everyone around her. Now, in a normal state, she's no way would she shout in front of people. So, as I say, she's actually quite shy in some ways, but because of the anger trance state, she blocked out everyone around her. She totally focused on him. It was only when she calmed down and came out of that trance state that she became re-aware of where she was and the situation she was in, and so forth. So these aren't cognitive conditions. They're much more like hypnotic conditions than conditions of thinking. People don't get angry just through the way they think, but the way they feel, which produces the way they think. It kind of works the other way around more often. People don't consciously decide to have a panic attack. Often the panic attack just happens and they think afterwards. Now, cognitive therapists try to get people to, what are you thinking before you have the panic attack? And often the panic attack just comes out of nowhere, or, you don't decide consciously to blush and then blush. The blushing kind of works from the unconscious mind. So it makes sense to deal on the unconscious level with these patterns of behavior and experience. So that's why we see hypnosis in a much bigger context than many people do.
Hypnosis just happens.
Yeah, exactly. It's all around us. And in a sense, we can't help but use it, but we can use it much more powerfully when we really understand the extent to which we could use it, and when we know that we're using it as well.
On one last note about that, I always tell everybody that I don't care what people think, they're constantly using self-hypnosis. A good example being Bruce Lee. He had such discipline. And he also had the very, like you were talking about earlier, he had the very formless approach. He had such discipline to become one of the world's most, probably the world's most recognized martial artist.
Yeah, absolutely. And the wonderful thing about Bruce Lee or Milton Erickson, and you can, was their ability to transcend recognizable technique but apply to universal principles. Okay, so they're still using technique, but they're not using it in such a rigid way that it's you say, oh, he's doing karate, or he's doing aikido, or he's doing kung fu, or he's doing taekwondo here, or whatever. And in the same way that he would just naturalistically do what was required in the situation. Same way with Milton Erickson, you wouldn't say, oh, he's doing cognitive behavioral therapy here, or he's doing interpersonal therapy, or humanistic therapy, or psycho-Freudian psychoanalytical therapy, psychodynamic therapy, or solution-focused therapy. It's almost as if, because of his intuitive understanding of the unique situation of the person, he was able to sort of apply universal principles in a very fluid way. And that was the beauty of what he was doing.
The unique thing about both Erickson and Bruce Lee is they both had a large grasp of anatomy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not that they didn't study; they studied incredibly intensely. And you could say that there's other people in other fields who reached that sort of point of like Picasso in art, for example, who studied all kinds of different art and then kind of transcended it, and sort of certain musicians and so forth. So it's not that they don't learn the technique, but they're not bound by it, not hidebound by rigid technique or approaches, and that's really the sort of value, because people aren't just hypnotic beings, and they're not just cognitive beings, and they're not just behavioral beings. They're human beings are made up of all these different aspects to themselves. So somebody should be able to use hypnosis in conjunction with other approaches.
Yeah, what's his name? Bruce Lee would have been an awesome person to model.
Yeah.
Not really possible now.
No, what happens is the same with anything. Is if people just try to sort of rigidly try to become him, or just try to copy him, rather than finding this capacity within themselves. Rather than trying to be like somebody else, you have to be yourself, but in the best possible way.
Join the ranks of the movers and shakers in the hypnosis and NLP community. Subscribe to the newsletter and discover why this podcast is taking the world by storm.
Now, I know that you're real big on working with depression. What can you tell my audience about the depression learning path on your depression site, which is clinical-depression.co.uk?
Okay, well, this is a site we set up a number of years ago, and it's pretty popular. We get thousands of visitors a day doing the learning path, which is a free resource for people, talking to them about depression in a common sense way. Because one thing people get depressed about is their depression, or they get anxious about their depression because it can seem like, it's often framed in our society as a disease or something you're born with, something that you always have to live with and so forth, which is terrifying, It's like diabetes or something, it's this thing you've got, that you have little control over, and it's just your chemicals in your brain and so forth. But of course, the research doesn't bear that out. Okay. So as I say, we put up this free resource. The Learning Path is a free resource to help people understand what depression really is, how it arises, and the best ways, as far as research has shown us, to help overcome it and keep it from happening in the future. So we found that the average person doesn't really know that much about the research that's been done into how best to treat depression. For example, there's a huge meta-analysis, an analysis of loads of different research studies of over 100,000 pieces of research into the causes and consequences and best treatments for clinical depression. And this was carried out over 15 years, and they found that depression is primarily a chemical disorder. Okay, most people don't get depressed because they've got bad chemicals in their brain. Okay, depression can change the biochemistry of your brain, but it doesn't tend to be caused by it. They also found that antidepressants shouldn't be the first line of treatment, and that effective psychotherapy is not only better than drug treatments for lifting clinical depression, but also is much more likely to prevent relapse in the future. Okay. The Learning Path describes what depression does to people, how it makes people think and behave, but it also gives people a chance to see the classic patterns of depression from the outside, if that makes sense. the all or nothing thinking, black or white thinking, the perfectionism, or the catastrophizing about the future, the chronic stress that depression sort of generates, and the way depression is both caused by people not getting their emotional and physical needs met, but also in turn blocks people meeting these needs in the future. There's a hypnotic element to depression in the sense that depressed people go inward and focus on their imagination, but they, rather than using their imagination constructively, as hypnotherapists, aim for people to do, the depressed person will misuse their imagination to frighten themselves or to depress themselves about the past or to cause regret or guilt and so forth. So, a primary aspect of treating depression is helping people think differently, of course, but also helping them relax. If you, Antonio, have found that sometimes you work with a depressed person, and it's like giving water to someone who's come across a desert and they really, really, really need water. And what you're giving them is just relaxation at that point. And because cortisol levels in the bloodstream, stress levels in the bloodstream are elevated always in people who are depressed, then they need to relax. And they look different when they come out. You see someone who came in depressed, and it's not that you've cured the depression just by relaxing them, but you need to, in order for the mind to start working in a more balanced way again, you need to decrease the stress cortisol levels in the bloodstream, so that they have access to left parts of the prefrontal lobe again. Because what you find in depressed people is that the left prefrontal lobe in the brain doesn't work so much. And this is part of the brain that does sequential planning and planning for the future and can think logically. And one of the things that depressed people say when they become depressed is that they can't think logically anymore. They can't plan anything for the future. Then they start feeling stupid and so forth. They're not stupid. It's just that, of course they're not, but it's just that the elevated stress for a prolonged period of time has changed the way their brain has been operating. And relaxation can sort of help correct that to some extent. So, we're really proud of this resource, clinicaldepression.co.uk or clinical-depression.co.uk, because so many people tell us that it doesn't just reassure them, but also helps them take steps to best manage depression, either for themselves or people close to them. This is something that's ongoing, really, and people use as a resource, and we're happy to say that a lot of people get a lot out of it.
As a person who's dealt with depression before, like severe depression, no amount of chemicals back in the day, they didn't do anything. It was actually being able to... Actually, I don't know where my quote-unquote severe depression got cured. I don't know what tipped it over, but it wasn't any kind of medicine. I think it was more of just self-work.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, it's interesting, I think especially in America perhaps, but also here in the UK, there's almost become a taboo about talking about antidepressants. There's a cultural taboo about criticizing them. Now I don't think me criticizing antidepressants is going to particularly impact upon the multi-billion-dollar industry that antidepressants are. But these products aren't without their risks, and also they're time and time again they've been shown to be not significantly more effective than placebo. Now placebo is highly effective, of course, and shouldn't be, it's not a small thing. Placebo expectations are incredibly important, and depression is all about expectation. People having expectations that are negative about the past and about the future. And if they can have a positive expectation created by a drug, then that can help lift the depression, of course. But it's not the drug doing it; it's the placebo response. But which in itself is necessary. Positive expectation is necessary to come out of depression. But which wouldn't matter so much if A, the antidepressants weren't so expensive, and B, they didn't have so many depressing side effects. So a more effective placebo would be something like a sugar pill or something like that. I don't want to come. I'm not massively anti. I'm not sort of fanatically anti-drug. Drugs for many things are highly sort of life-saving in some aspects in the physical area of life. But psychotropic drugs, their true efficacy has by no means been as established as drug companies would like to have us believe, put it that way.
That is true. And the one thing when you talk about expectation, one thing I've been doing lately, I don't know how relevant this is. I was doing street hypnosis recently, probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago at a local art festival, and I wouldn't do it. Only therapeutic stuff I'll do out in public might be just for like study habits, helps, just real basic stuff, nothing traumatic. If somebody wants help sleeping, helping with exercise, etc. One thing I'll do, knowing that usually when people come out of hypnotic trance are really thirsty, I'll set up the expectation. I'll basically tell them when they come out of hypnosis that if they're thirsty, that's a sign that their unconscious is already beginning to create those changes. And once they come out, they kind of have the expectation of if they're thirsty, the sign it's already happening. And when they come out, I'm like, so how's it going? I can see them kind of licking their lips. I'm like, you're thirsty, right? And then you can see them it kind of clicks in their head.
Yeah. That's absolutely linking a hypnotic phenomena or suggestion to a therapeutic sort of outcome. And you could open a bar, Antonio, in fact. But yes, people are always thirsty. But yeah, I mean, you can do that in all kinds of ways as well. You might say, as that hand continues to lift, you'll notice a sense within your mind of an experience of being very confident on that date, So you're linking the hypnotic phenomena of hand levitation to an increased sense inwardly of what it's going to be like to be very confident and relaxed on a date, or you might, eyelid catalepsy as well, you might suggest to somebody that their eyes won't open until their unconscious mind lets them know that they can, be free of those cigarettes in the future, or whatever. So you're making hypnotic phenomena contingent upon a therapeutic gain, which is, if you get hypnotic phenomena, then it makes sense to actually use it therapeutically for somebody. So yeah, certainly you can make that link between any sort of hypnotic phenomena and some kind of therapeutic progression, I think.
You're listening to the Hawaii Hypnosis Podcast. Can I ask you to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes by going to hawaiihypnosis.org/iTunes and give us a 5-star rating?
What stands out as a high spot from your hypnotherapeutic career? Do you have any particular client cases that really stick out in your mind?
Yeah, certainly do. I mean, many of them from my earlier days of working with people, because you're new to it, and sometimes it feels a bit sort of like it's a big thing because you're new to it. So I remember my very first client, and he was terrified. He was walking up the steps of the clinic that I was working in. I could hear his footsteps coming, and I'd never seen a paying client before, and it was a massive thing for me. And I was having panic attacks, and I was he had to calm me down when he finally arrived. and I didn't know what he would come for, and he just I thought, was he clinically depressed? Was he had terrible post-traumatic stress disorder? Was he addicted to cocaine or heroin or something? Turns out he just wanted help to play the piano a bit better. So I remember that was a very sort of powerful memory. But as far as therapy, I remember working with a woman who had been incredibly abused, and between the ages of 12 and 18. And she was a lovely woman, but she'd been a parent. She'd had a life full of misfortune. Her father was diagnosed schizophrenic, and he'd murdered her mother, and this had happened in front of her and her brother. They'd gone to live with grandparents, both of whom were sadistic and beat the pair of them. But from the ages of 12 to 18, and this was what she was having trouble with, not surprisingly, her uncle had come to live with them, and he was, sort of a sexual predator, and he basically raped her between the ages of 12 and 18. And he was a car mechanic, and she was finding 30 years later that whenever she smelt oil, she would have post-hypnotic flashback to the trauma of being raped and so forth. And she was also finding that because he used to wake her up during the night, that on the hour, every hour, she'd wake up and she'd be wide awake, so she couldn't sleep. So what I did with her was, but despite that, she had many, she was working, she had a relationship which wasn't perfect, but it was all right, and so forth. So she was still struggling through. She was running a lot. She'd run all the time because she was so pumped full of adrenaline. And she became incredibly fit and doing marathons and so forth. But she wanted a better life for herself. So basically, we looked at sort of, deconditioning the very worst memories that she had. Okay, the hundreds of times that she'd been assaulted in this way, but we took the very, very worst times, and we did something called a rewind technique with them, which helped her comfortably no longer feel traumatized by these times. And that worked. She couldn't even recall every single time, but the brain got the pattern. So, after working with her, eventually, she no longer felt traumatized by what had happened to her. And the change was kind of miraculous. We did some other stuff as well, but she started sleeping again. She didn't feel the obsessive need to exercise. She actually she got a better relationship with someone who, someone else, and she got a better job, and she looked different, and she started becoming the wonderful person that it was her birthright to be. And but I think that the sort of ultimate part of that was she came to me one day and she said, "I'm going to a family wedding and the uncle's going to be there. He's very old now, and I feel okay about it, I think, but I'm worried that somehow it will happen again, even though he's an old man and I'm a strong woman, And so we did some work on, and I said, "Well, do you want to go to this thing?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, how do you want to feel about it?" And she said, "I just want to feel indifferent to it, And, I don't want to hate it. I just want to feel indifferent to it." And so we did some work on that, and she went to this wedding, and she said, afterwards she said that she'd finally laid the ghost to rest and she could forget all about him once and for all. She felt like he wasn't even there, and she was so much bigger than he was. And that to me was profound because of the huge transformation in this woman and her life. And it wasn't just down to me at all. It was because she was very, very good to work with. You get good clients as well as good therapists.
I found out that anytime when you do work with somebody, if you get a good transformation, for me, it makes my body tingle almost, where I just get I get an emotional high from it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very powerful thing. I mean, even if it's something like stopping smoking, because although it might not seem as, like a massive shift, what you may have done is enabled or help enable this person to have 10 more years with the grandchildren, which is, although the effects are less easy to sort of quantify, they can be there, nevertheless. So but you're absolutely right. When you see someone overcome a lifelong phobia or, stop taking heroin, or get their life in order, it's massively satisfying. There's no two ways about it.
What advice would you give people wanting to learn the therapeutic use of hypnosis starting today? Okay,
well, I think the best advice I could give somebody would be to learn about psychology. So many hypnotherapists seem to think that their only area of expertise is hypnosis, whereas of course hypnosis applies to all areas of life, I think, and all areas of therapy. So the counsellor, if you think about it, the counsellor may ask someone about their past. What happens, a person gets into thinking about their past and the room disappears and that person's entered a trance. Now, whether that's a happy trance or an unhappy trance or a genuinely therapeutic trance or otherwise, is open to debate. But, so you as a hypnotherapist, you as a budding hypnotherapist are in a position to learn more about real psychology than psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors, and so forth. That's a big statement. So don't be underconfident is what I'm saying. About your capacity to learn about human nature by studying the field of hypnosis. The mother of Western psychotherapy was began to mesmerize people, or who sort of instigated hypnosis, and Freud started off as a hypnotherapist, and we're going back to something very basic but very powerful and profound here. It's not a small area. You're not just an alternative therapist. you're a central therapist. Okay. But I also think people need to learn about solution-focused therapy, and so not using hypnotherapy to sort of so-called uncover sort of past traumas that the person didn't know they were supposed to have, but actually working in a sensible, solution-focused, science-based way. So learning about solution-focused approaches, brief strategic therapy, and so forth. I think aligning your hypnotherapy practice with that is probably the best thing that you can do to actually genuinely start helping people. And also read as much as possible. Read everything and learn as much as possible, and be totally open as well, but not so open that you'll believe anything.
You want to have a firm grasp on reality.
Absolutely, yeah, and you don't have to be precious about hypnosis and think that it's some kind of mystical state in itself, because as you can hypnotize people in a street setting or at a party or just by your conversation. If they're transfixed by your conversation, they forget everything else, then they become more suggestible to your ideas. So it is a kind of hypnotic situation.
And what you bring up about hypnosis being mystical, hypnosis isn't magic in and of itself. Doing hypnosis, I found out, is fairly easy. It's what you do afterwards that makes the world of difference.
Absolutely. As I said, really, it's a delivery system. Hypnosis is a delivery system which makes the mind more receptive to learning. You want to hope that learning is good learning. It's not learning how to have a phobia or learning how to be depressed. So it's what you do with the hypnosis that's important, not the hypnosis in itself. So, hypnosis isn't a therapy. It's a facet of human functioning, if you like, but a very powerful one, and we can use it for therapy.
Join the ranks of the movers and shakers in the hypnosis and NLP community. Subscribe to the newsletter and discover why this podcast is taking the world by storm.
A lot of people in my audience, they really want to know about your website, your main website, hypnosisdownloads.com.
Okay, well, hypnosisdownloads.com has been up since 2003, and my long-standing colleague Roger Elliott and myself set the website up in all those years ago, and we wanted to replicate what we were doing with individual clients as far as possible with the rest of the world. Okay, it sounds a bit grandiose, but now, of course, it's not entirely possible to tailor a specific pre-recorded download to a specific individual. So, superficially, it might seem, sort of getting away from what I've been talking about. But by careful use of language and shared experiences common to, say, everyone with a phobia or, a particular worry that most people with depression seem to have, when talking in those terms, we can actually, we found that these downloads are applicable to as many numbers of people as possible. Okay, so many people get in touch with us saying it's as if you were talking just to me. Okay, and as you know, by using hypnotic language skillfully, then you can allow for a lot of human experience. So of course, it's not completely tailored to an individual, but by using permissive language and all these other hypnotic techniques and ways of communicating, we can make it as applicable to as many people as possible. So we also sell scripts of all the downloads on the site for therapists. Not to, we strongly recommend they don't just read them to clients, although some hypnotherapists do that, but that's kind of, that's a bit backward, because obviously, it's breaking rapport with a client just by reading to them, okay, because, it doesn't make them feel very special or unique. But, we sell these scripts as a source of ideas and ways of working with someone rather than just to be read. Some people have got back to us and told us that the downloads help them more than anything else they've tried, so they've been psychiatrists, counselors, psychologists, but it was listening to, a sort of, download from us that really helped them change, and again, you get that buzz, you get that wonderful feeling of having helped somebody, but remotely now. So we help people in India, Africa, of course, America, all over Europe. There was somebody who got in touch with us saying that her son had been covered in warts, and so much so that it was painful for him to walk. and hundreds of agonizing warts throughout his body, and he had lots of treatment that had proved ineffective. But, listening to the Get Rid of Warts download, for him, not just once, but, a few times, actually helped him clear the warts, or it seemed to be. That was the instigating factor. So, certainly they can be very, very powerful. And, people have got back to us saying they got pregnant after listening to the fertility treatment one. So we're getting people pregnant as well, when they want to get pregnant.
You know what? Sorry, I should. I've got to make sure I don't listen to that one.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, that can happen as well. Hysterical pregnancy. That's an interesting thing. Men are so in rapport with their female partners that their stomach swells up as well. And if that's not interesting commentary on the power of the human mind, I don't know what is. But we're not claiming, as you said, that hypnosis is a miracle, but we've had so much positive feedback from hypnosis downloads over the years that we're confident that we've encapsulated what's best, what's best in therapeutic practice as far as hypnosis is concerned within these downloads. So we have around 800 sessions, as I said, and categories for the sessions include addiction, hypnosis for depression, bad habits, pain. We've got a section for cancer, and all the proceeds of that go to cancer charity. Sexual problems and self-confidence and self-esteem, and all the sort of areas of human beings everywhere have difficulty with from time to time. We've also started producing 10-step courses for people, and the latest one is 10 steps to sexual success for men, which has 10 PDF chapters with cartoons done by me. But also each chapter has a specific hypnotic download to help overcome problems, and also help men attain higher sexual enjoyment and functioning. We've got 10-step courses on improving self-esteem will be a new one, and better public speaking and overcoming self-consciousness and anxiety, and all these areas. So they're worth looking at as well, I think. And we're finding, from a business point of view, we're finding that we're developing our affiliates. Plenty of affiliates sending traffic our way. Myself and Roger went to New York in August, which is great. To the big affiliate summit there, developing the business and meeting other people. So that's great. So it's going from strength to strength, and we're really enjoying continuing to work on it.
And for anybody that wants to check out some of these recordings, if you're not on my website, if you don't see the link on my website, you can go to hawaiihypnosis.org/hypnosis downloads. And you're probably aware of the fact that's an affiliate link, and I basically need to be able to pay for my apartment, pay for toilet paper, because I don't want to have to be sleeping by the beach, which is not necessarily a bad thing to do in paradise.
Certainly better where you are than where I am to do that.
I would imagine so. The water's a little bit warmer.
Yeah.
When you talk about your recordings having more of a personalized approach, that's why I really like that. So most recordings out there are just kind of a standard induction, close your eyes, imagine this, do this, do this, do that, you're cured.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to be as naturalistic or as possible with people. You don't have to be, because some people respond to direct orders. If someone's been in the military, they're more likely to respond to direct orders, during hypnosis. So, but there are more artful ways of doing that. There are better ways of actually maximizing the chances of someone responding positively to therapeutic suggestions, so that you don't set up a contrariness inwardly in the person, so they're not inwardly thinking, I'm not going to do that because I've been told to do that. You present someone with the opportunity presenting someone with an opportunity to do something or to become something is different from ordering them to do it directly. If you tell someone, you are getting sleepy, what you're talking to is their conscious mind, because that's how you talk to the conscious mind. The unconscious mind deals in metaphor, analogy, storytelling, indirect suggestion. So in order to get a response from the unconscious mind, you need to talk in the unconscious mind's language. This is the way I see it. Rather than, it's amazing how many hypnotherapists talk the language of the conscious mind in order to attempt to facilitate an unconscious response. It can work, of course, but it's not the most effective way for the most people.
Make sure you have a well-rounded approach.
Yeah, I think so.
What plans do you have for the future?
Okay, well, I'm going to get a cup of coffee after this, straight after. But no, seriously, we've got lots of plans for the website. We are going to be doing a lot more video footage. So I'm going to be filming client sessions, treating people with panic attacks, phobias, addictions, and so forth. And we'll be showing clips of those on the site at some point. We're developing more 10-step courses. We're developing our training. We have online training on hypnosisdownload.com. We're looking to do a solution-focused hypnotherapy course that people will be able to download and do remotely. And generally just applying, we're looking on our site at opening a community section as well, so that we can have more interaction with people who use hypnosisdownloads.com. So we are pretty busy, but enjoying being busy.
A lot of people get stressed out about being busy, but being busy means that hopefully it means you're making a contribution to society.
Yeah. Hopefully, as you say, you can be busy with being destructive as well, of course. But yes, the fact that demand has caused us to become more busy in a sense. So we're busy because there is so much demand. That's the encouraging thing. There's so much positive feedback that kind of compels us to be more busy. But as we say, we enjoy that process. We enjoy the process of creating new content for people, stuff that helps people if they've got difficulties, but also helps other people learn how to help people with difficulties. So it's an extremely satisfying, uniquely satisfying work to do, I think, and I wouldn't do anything else.
This whole talk has been awesome. You really you opened my eyes to quite a few things. You helped to make a lot of correlations, one of them being, I think you call it like parallel universe with hypnosis, kind of the duality of everything.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for having me on the show, and I'll speak to you soon, Antonio. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Hawaii Hypnosis Podcast. Connect with us at facebook.com/Hawaii Hypnosis, twitter.com/Hawaii Hypnosis, and youtube.com/Hawaii Hypnosis.